Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're doing good and well. So it's time for another horror tier list on the channel, and this time I'm tackling 80s slasher horror movies. Now, I'm not including any of the films from the big franchises like A Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, or Friday the 13th in this tier list, and that's simply because I'll be doing those in a different tier list later on in the year. These are just 80s slasher movies that I've recently watched that have come recommended to me or that I found online that I thought I would check out. There's not necessarily any particularly common theme to them apart from the fact that they are 80s slasher movies. So I'm going to go through each of these. I've got my tier lists for each one. S tier is going to be the films I'm calling a true gem. A tier are the films I regard as really solid slashers, true slasher gold. Then we got Dumb But Fun, the films that I think have a lot of the typical slasher film problems, but they're still fun to watch and entertaining. We got Below Par. This is where we're heading towards the films I really don't recommend you watch, and I would say I watch them so you don't have to. And Slasher Trash is definitely the case that I think you shouldn't really bother watching these films and, avoid them like the plague. So those are the scales that we're dealing with here for each of these slasher movies. We've got 16 slasher films. One thing I'll say, to me, 80 slasher films, they're a bit like junk food in the way that you know that they're unhealthy, but you kind of enjoy them whilst you're experiencing them. But I'm going to be honest and upfront about some of these films, which I just thought were frankly bottom of the barrel, absolute trash. And I won't be afraid to say that where I think that, because I think you have to sometimes call out trash for what it is. But I'll get it sometimes also if you grew up with these films or if you went out to see them when they came out and you regard them as cult classics. I'll understand that and still respect that. At the time, maybe uh, people loved these films when they came out, and I can kind of understand that point of view. And that times have changed. A lot of these films have not aged well, is what I'm saying, in short. But anyway, let's crack on with this tier list. And we're going to start here with The Funhouse, directed by Tobe Hooper, who directed the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And you can definitely feel his stamp and influence on this film. It's quite psychological. The kills are a little bit more carefully filmed and not done in such a blatant and overtly gory way or anything. There's not much gore in this film at all, really, I don't think. It was one of the first films I watched, so it's a bit more distant in my memory. But it does also have some of the classic slasher issues of having, gratuitous nudity and all those sorts of things. But it wasn't bad. I'm going to put it in dumb but fun. Although I didn't think it was, I thought it was actually quite smart as a film in some ways. So it's not totally true that it's dumb, but it's in the middle tier because I neither feel particularly positive about it, nor do I feel particularly negative about it. So it's going in the middle tier for that reason. Now, the next film, Chopping Mall, directed by Jim Wynorski, is definitely dumb but fun. Killer robots in a shopping mall, right? It's what it sounds. It is what it sounds like. It's just a bit of a laugh. It's goofy. It's silly. It's got the cheese and sleaze of 80 slashers, but it's done in a fun and entertaining way. The kills are actually, a couple of the kills made me laugh out loud. They were so just daft and ridiculous. But I mean, it's dumb fun. It's nothing more than that. Cheap thrills, cheap slasher movie, does what it does, and leaves you with pretty much your expectations met. So this is a middle tier film for me. Next up, we got Silent Night, Deadly Night. This is where I'm probably gonna, there's divided opinion about this film as far as I know, or at least some people regard it as a cult classic. I personally think this film is pretty diabolical. Here's the thing about this for me. When I saw that the film is also about a killer Santa, I thought it might be more fun and entertaining as well. I thought that you'd have a silly element to it that I can get behind and enjoy. But the film is so dark in tone. And there's also, in this one, the gratuitous nudity thing, which you come to expect with a lot of 80 slashes. But there's also a sort of element of sexualized violence in this one as well, which I think is where I start to feel a bit more uncomfortable. Um, but it's, I suppose having talked quite negatively about this film so far, one thing it does achieve is there's a logic to the story and a logic to how it explains how the killer Santa became the killer Santa. But other than that, I thought this was a bad movie. But that sequencing saves it from me just putting it in trash. But I'm close to saying that film, And I know it spawned other films. I know some of you are gonna love the film. But just this is just my own opinion that I thought it was just genuinely pretty awful. But it's going into below par because I liked the way they sequenced things with how they made you understand how the killer became the killer. Next up, I'm dealing with Maniac Cop, directed by William Lustig, and actually stars, you got some acting pedigree. You got Bruce Campbell in this film, you got Tom Atkins, you got this whole crime investigation story happening alongside the slasher story, the kills, and it gives it a film a bit more depth. The characters are slightly better crafted, and you're made to relate to them a little bit more. I guess they're still not particularly lovable characters in most cases, but there is an understanding you can develop with how the film reaches its different key stages. And I absolutely love the chase scene in this. The car chase towards the end was fantastic. And this has kind of a bit of an action film vibe to it and crime investigation element, as well as being sort of the 80s slasher stuff. So I really like this one. It just has a bit more quality, genuine quality, and I'm going to put Maniac Cop, as I've just done, into S tier, into a true gem. I think that is one you guys need to check out if you haven't already. It's genuinely great fun and actually good quality for me as well. And yet, I think it has pretty kind of modest ratings, but I loved this one. I thought it was great, good stunts, and a bit of story, and just things you want to see when you see a slasher film as well. Next up, I've got The Initiation. This was directed by Larry Stewart, and I didn't get this film at all. I'm not sure it's total trash as such, but it's not far from it for me. Again, I think people like this as a cult classic, and I fine, but I don't get that. It's kind of weird. It's just pure weirdness to me. You know, maybe some okay kills, but I didn't, man, I just didn't really understand this film, to be frank. I think I was tired when I was watching this film. I'd gotten through quite a few of these films already by this point, and it was just like I was just kind of on the point of giving up, to be quite frank with this. It's this girl that's experiencing this recurring nightmare, and she's trying to get to the bottom of it. And in the meantime, there are kills happening, but it's just kind of weird. And I'm just putting that one there for into below par. I just didn't really get the sequencing of the film and the story, how it was setting the story up. Just all kind of weird to me. Next up, we've got Curtains, directed by Richard Chupka. Got to check my notes. Yeah, Richard Chupka. I don't know how you say his name actually there. Could be saying that wrong. Again, another below par film to me, to be quite honest. I sort of thought that it had one really great scene in it, to be honest, a really amazing kill with a girl who's ice skating and she's being chased by the killer. I thought that was amazing, absolutely amazing, like easily the best scene in the entire movie. But the rest of the film just kind of was a little bit, again, schlocky. And I sort of thought the film at least did have a story, again, that I could sort of understand what it was trying to achieve with that. Where you have this woman who's trying to get a lead role in a film, and she makes an effort to go to a mental asylum to get into the role, but in the meantime, the director's going behind her back and trying to cast a different character, a different leading lady, leading woman. And it all gets kind of just, again, just a film I just didn't really kind of understand fully what it was, just felt a bit clunky too, the way it was filmed, I thought. But that one scene just stood out above all of the others. And therefore I thought it was pretty good. No, not so good, sorry. Next up, we've got My Bloody Valentine, directed by George Mihalko. Now, I thought this was a good slasher film. And it's also, again, a bit of a cult classic. I understand it has a cult following, and I can see why in this case. You got a really cool setting of this in this film. You got it all taking place in a mine. And so the killings happen in a mine. In one instance, you've got a minecart scene, which is really good as well. And the characters are a bit better formed here. And you've even got a love triangle thing happening. And I really enjoyed all of that. I thought that gave the film, again, I like slashers when they try something different and when they also have a little bit more believability. I say believability. I don't know if that's quite the right word to use here, but it was a little bit better. And I just felt there was, again, something that's made this film stand apart a bit more than the rest of the bunch, especially when I've seen a lot of these films. I've seen a lot by this point. I thought it was actually pretty good. So I'm putting My Bloody Valentine into slasher gold. Oh, next up, we've got a bad one. Pieces from 1983, directed by Juan Piqué Simon. So this film, to me, felt like it was just very deliberately exploitative. Um, and again, I can sort of, with some of these films, you sort of find that you can see the fun elements to them, I think. And but this film just went down ran a road which I thought was uncomfortably voyeuristic in the way all the kills felt more, sexualized and weird. And it was very much more on the exploitation side of things than, you know, I know these are 80s slashers and there's a lot of that in these films, but this one, it was kind of excessive and it felt like a lot of the film was just purely that and that there wasn't anything else there. So that's what I'm trying to say. And it's taken me a while to say it, but I think it's total trash. Pieces is the film. So Pieces was directed by Juan Piqué Simon. That one's going into the bottom tier for me. Again, if you love this film, I'm sorry, but I have to, I'm being honest about what I think of these films. And Pieces is one I would tear to pieces because it's really not good. Next up, we've got Eric's Revenge, or it's called Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge, directed by Richard Friedman. And it's about this guy that's coming back, seemingly having been killed off, and he's wreaking revenge on, I think, people that wronged him. Again, my memory of, after seeing all these films, it's not always that great. I may have got elements of the story in this film wrong. I'm just kind of doing it based on my notes and what I remember about the film. There are some cool kills in this and some good stunts. And I actually thought that those are definitely plus points of this movie. Again, it's very sleazy and it has all the classic 80s slasher issues, but I'm going to call this one dumb but fun. I could enjoy this. And of the two Richard Friedman films I think I've got in my tier list, because we got Doom Asylum coming up as well, this was definitely the better one. This was more fun. You know, the characters again are kind of shallow, but I thought just the stunts and the action sequences in this entertained me enough for me to put it into dumb but fun. Okay, next up, we've got Hell Nights from 1981. You got Linda Blair in this film. This kind of has a creepy haunted house feel to it. And I enjoyed this. I thought this was good. Still, again, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I liked the haunted house vibe. I thought it had one of the more believable romances in it out of any of these films. There's another romance I enjoyed that I'm going to talk about a bit later on in one of these other films. But the romance, I think it was Jeff and Marty in this movie, with their names of the characters. I liked that. I liked the way they were kind of establishing a bit of a romance that was founded on the fact they had class differences. And I thought it was kind of neat in the way that was done and the way their relationship developed as the film went on. It just felt like the film was a little bit more, it knew what it was trying to be. It was just fun, haunted house style, and I kind of dug it. So I'm going to put Hell Night into Slasher Gold. I think just behind My Bloody Valentine there. All right, next up we've got The Burning, and another film I'm going to be talking quite negatively about because I just thought this had lots of shallow, creepy characters, hardly any redeeming qualities in the characters. The one thing I did enjoy were the sort of the villain and how he had this kind of interesting scissors gimmick thing going on, which you can see in the film poster as well there. But I just thought this film was kind of slimy and just didn't really do a lot for me. So The Burning, again, bit of a cult classic amongst slashers fans. So again, I'm probably going to get some level of, this film's better than that. But for me, I'm going to call it below par for the purposes of my own sort of view on these different movies. Next up, we've got Alone in the Dark. Big names in this like Donald Pleasance, and you've also got Jack Palance as well, who's been in Star Trek stuff as well, I think. And I thought it was pretty good up to a point. And I liked how this one had a group of killers as opposed to just one single killer. You had a slightly different formula to the classic slasher formula. And I enjoyed some of the character interactions in this, but I still think I'm going to put this one in dumb but fun because it felt a bit clunky. Um, and I didn't really feel ever drawn into the film completely. Like it was again one of these films I struggled a little bit to get through, but I appreciate the performances in this one and the ideas a little bit more. So it's going to be middle tier, I think, for me, this one. And maybe put that one actually at the top of Dumb but Fun because it is kind of bordering on Slasher Gold, but it's not quite Slasher Gold. It didn't quite do enough for me to get into that tier. All right, next up we got Deadly Blessing, directed by none other than Wes Craven. And I enjoyed quite a few Wes Craven movies. Even with that bias aside, I genuinely really liked this film. I liked how you had the story kind of nicely developed. You had this kind of strict religious community with this, very strict leader, I think, and lots of outsiders kind of at odds with them, and their interactions are quite interesting. Um, what I loved about Deadly Blessing was actually one of the character that this was where there was a romance that felt more than just most of the romances in slasher horrors, particularly in this era, are just very shallow. It's all about sex and all that kind of stuff. But in Deadly Blessing, I thought that there was actually a genuinely charming romance. If I honestly felt that with Vicky and John, as John is kind of from the strict religious community and Vicky's one of the cast as a bit of an outsider, and the way they come together and develop this blossoming romance, I think is it's really great. I really enjoyed it, and I really liked that. And the film itself also has some pretty good scenes of horror and suspense, and does a lot right. And I was so surprised, actually. I was expecting this given its ratings. I'd never seen this before. It's an early Wes Craven film before A Nightmare on Elm Street. And in fact, it foreshadows a lot of what a couple of the scenes from A Nightmare on Elm Street as well. Um, there was a lot to like about Deadly Blessing. And yeah, to me, more of a blessing than a curse. I enjoyed this film and it's going into a true gem. I think this warrants an S tier rating. So next up is Doom Asylum, and I have already indicated where I might put this film. I think it's a foregone conclusion that this one is doomed from the very beginning. This is not a good film. It's very amateurish. It has all the slimy slasher elements like maximized, and it's just very clumsy the way it's done. I think the scenes sometimes they're trying to be funny, but they just lose they're so over the top that they lose kind of for me the humor a bit because they're just so wacky and wild and don't really do anything. The film is just a total garbage. For some people this film might be so bad it's good. I can almost see that, but for me, it's just so bad. It's bad. Is it that bad? Absolutely that bad. This is below, this is the worst of the worst. This is like the nightmare of the decomposed of this slasher film list. So Nightmares of the Decomposed. So that's slasher trash. Next up, we got the Slumber Party Massacre. I'm getting to the end now. I can see a light at the end of this dark slasher tunnel here. Slumber Party Massacre. Uh, I know this is another cult classic, but I don't get it. I just don't really get it. Um, Maybe I'll be nice and put it in Dumb But Fun because I did think it had some character building and some level of story. There's not really much of a story here, let's be honest. You had this, I was kind of disappointed with the kills because you have this guy wielding a drill, so I thought it might be a bit more gory than it was. I know when this happened, it was like the early 80s. So maybe that's why you didn't really get much of that. But yeah, this was Amy Holland Jones directed this, and apparently written by a feminist. But I mean, this film didn't feel like, as I was watching it, much of a feminist type of movie. It was again there was a lot of the gratuitous nudity stuff at the start. So, but yeah, I mean, it was dumb fun. This one, it was dumb fun for me, and I would say nothing much more, but nothing less than that either. Right, last up, we're at the end now. We're dealing with Intruder, and this was directed by Scott Spiegel. And I actually own this on DVD as well. I got it fairly recently and quite cheap. Because I like this film a lot. I think I'm not sure I'm going to call this a true gem though. I still think it's definitely not perfect, but it's a dark horse gem in the slasher in the 80s slashers. It's one that came out late in the 80s, but it has some absolutely brilliant kills in this film that are really gory, really well done. I think it has to go, for me, it's top of slasher gold at the least. Um, you've actually got a cameo from Bruce Campbell in this. It's like that Bruce Campbell influence comes in and it makes the film that bit better, even though he's in this film for all of about 2 minutes, I think, at the end. But yeah, just a good film. And basically, this is a store has to close down, and then a, a killer emerges after that, and you're trying to link, well, is the killer linked to the store closing or not? And I like the way in this film the killer gets revealed as well. I really like the final girl in this one. She has that balance, that more believable balance of sort of having a resilience and toughness alongside some vulnerability. I like that that is mixed well together in her character, that she's neither your sort of classic scream queen, nor is she a really badass final girl either. She's like got sort of more of a believability, I think, a quality as a final girl that I liked. And I, you know, I liked her character quite a bit actually, and how she was kind of written in the movie too. So yeah, Intruder's a good one. That's a really solid one. I almost want to put it into S tier. But yeah, that's the end of the tier list. So let's quickly run through these before I shut down this video. We got the two gems. Highly recommend these two. Maniac Cop, for all its kind of action sequences and its interesting aspects with the crime investigation. It's a little bit different from a classic slasher, but that's what makes it a good film in my mind. Deadly Blessing, again, not necessarily sort of a typical slasher movie, but has some depth to it, some actual genuine relationships. Highly recommend, or genuinely good characters and relationships in. So I highly recommend Deadly Blessing. And it has some good horror elements too. Then next up, you got the Slasher Gold. I think these are really solid slasher films. Intruder, My Bloody Valentine, and Hell Night, all really good movies. I think personally, they have good qualities to them in each of them that are interesting and set them apart from some of these others. Then you got the dumb slashers, and perhaps these are only for you if you're diehard slasher fans. Alone in the Dark, The Funhouse, Chopping Mall, uh, Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge, and The Slumber Party Massacre. Next up are the below par ones, the ones I just really didn't dig and didn't enjoy. Silent Night, Deadly Night, The Initiation, Curtains, and Burning. And then the films I thought were really terrible, Pieces and Doom Asylum. So thank you all for watching. I do appreciate, I've had some strong opinions in this. But that's what makes these videos worth doing, I think, is it's worth giving your honest and frank views about these movies, particularly in the case of some of these movies. But I enjoyed doing this, and actually, it was good to find the gems I did find on this list. I wonder whether you think these are also gems, or actually if you think some of my bottom rated ones are gems for you. Let me know in the comments what you think. It's always good to debate these things and to talk about these films and share our love or hate of these films as we do. So anyway, until next time, thanks everybody as always for watching. Do drop a like and a sub to the channel if you enjoyed this kind of content. Otherwise, until next time, from me, bye for now.